Hello friends, today we are going to talk about animal tissues. As we know, tissues are basically a group of cells which have a particular function, carrying out a similar function and having a common origin. And so these tissues, when these group of cells come together to perform a specific function and having a common origin, we call them tissues. A group of tissues, when they come together, we call it as an organ. Two or more organs coming together form an organ system. And when there are two or more organ systems coming together, we call that as an organism. So today we are going to talk about these very specific tissues which are found in animals. So let us learn about them. The first type that we know about tissues is the first type which you're going to learn today is the epithelial tissue. All right. So when we talk of an epithelial tissue, just remember every tissue that we study, we will generally study it with respect to location, shape, or any specific characteristic of a particular tissue or the cells that make up the tissue and its function. So that makes it very easy to study every tissue and it is easy to remember them too. So let's talk about the epithelial tissue, the first type of animal tissue. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is its location. Where are the epithelial tissue found? It covers the entire body, right from outside and also lines from inside the body cavities, the internal organs, and our blood vessels. So all the covering from outside as well as the inner lining of all our body cavities, be it our internal organs, be it our entire gastrointestinal system, or be it our blood vessels, we will find this epithelial tissue or epithelium present there. How is the shape? They are generally flat, cuboidal, or columnar in shape. We will be discussing about each of these epithelial tissues, whether it is flat, cuboidal, or columnar in detail. The main function of the epithelial tissue we need to know is protection, absorption, secretion, and sensory perception. So wherever it is located, depending on the part that it is located, it will be serving a specific function. So now we are going to talk about each of these in detail. So we come to the first type of epithelial tissue, right? When we talk of epithelial tissue, we are going to talk about the first one. As I said, the flat one, we call it as the squamous epithelium. Please remember, whenever we talk of epithelial tissue, always there will be the presence of this basement membrane. So all the cells of the tissue will always be present on a base layer, which we call as a basement membrane. And over this, the cells will be arranged. So whenever we have to draw an epithelial tissue too, we will first draw the basement membrane, right? Like this. And then over that, we will be showing whichever epithelial tissue it might be. We will be showing the cells of that particular tissue. Please remember this. So epithelial tissue always is placed over a basement membrane. Very important to remember. Now, when I talk of a squamous epithelium, it is made up of thin plates of irregular cells. So the cells are going to be pretty irregular. If you can see, the shape of each of these is slightly irregular, not a fixed shape, and they are going to be flat. So this is the flat kind of epithelial tissue. It's present mostly in around our epidermis. The uppermost covering of our skin is made up of squamous epithelium. Even the lining of our mouth, mucosa, that is a mucous cavity, all your gastrointestinal tract, yes, is covered with this squamous epithelium. So its main function is protection of the underlying parts from any kind of mechanical injury, germs, harmful chemicals, and drying up. So if you remember, whenever we have anything hot to drink, yes, sometimes our mouth literally gets burned, and then later on there is a kind of a peeling occurring from our mouth. Yes, that is the epithelial layer that is getting shed off. Now what happens is when this epithelial layer is initially takes the brunt of that heat or that hot liquid that we have taken, and it protects the underlying structures, that is a muscular layer and the other structures. So that is very important for you to understand. Right, now we'll go to the next type, the cuboidal epithelium. Simple, you can understand just by talking about cuboidal, we know how the cells will be. You can see again here, there is the basement membrane drawn, the gray colored structure. Always whenever we show an epithelial tissue, a basement membrane is very, very essential, and over that. Now, when I talk of a cuboidal epithelium, they are made up of cuboidal cells. Where are they present? Important to remember are kidney tubules. So the tubules, the tubes of the nephron, they are made up of this cuboidal epithelium. The glandular ducts, like that of the salivary gland. So our salivary glands and the ducts of our salivary glands are lined by this particular type of tissue. So they're made up of, you can see, cuboidal cells placed over, and they're of the same type. Unlike the squamous epithelium, yes, and you can see they are placed over this basement membrane. So what is the function of the cuboidal epithelium? Secretion and absorption. So simple, when I talk of kidney tubules, kidney tubules, that is a nephron, they are mainly concerned with the excretory part, right? But some amount of absorption of some essential nutrients and water does take place. So yes, absorption takes place here because of the cuboidal epithelium, and also salivary ducts and salivary glands, when we talk of, yes, they are going to secrete. So secretion also is one function, as well as absorption is the function of your cuboidal epithelium. Yes, so a very, very important structure that you have to remember. All right, we go on to the third type. As I had told you earlier, after flat cuboidal, we had talked about the columnar epithelium. Yes, so let us know about the columnar. Columnar means column-like, like pillars. So it contains vertically arranged cylindrical or brick-like cells. So you will get to see the arrangement of cells in this way, like so, placed over the basement membrane, and you will be seeing the nucleus, a little basal nucleus present here. So they are column-like or pillar-like. Where are they present? They are present in the inner lining of the stomach or inner lining of intestines. Main function, absorption and secretion again. So here too, you are having special types of the functions of the columnar epithelium, column-like, pillar-like. We will be seeing the diagram too. Now in this type 2, we have different types of columnar epithelium. The first type which we are going to talk about is the ciliated columnar epithelium. So along with cells which are arranged like columns, they will also show thread-like protoplasmic projections, which we call as cilia. So there will be thread-like projections projecting out from one border or one side of these cells, of this epithelial cells, and we call that as cilia. And at that time, such kind of a columnar epithelium will be called a ciliated columnar epithelium. Okay, what is the, where is it located? In the lining of our trachea and the fallopian tubes. So the function is that the whip-like movement or the swaying movement of the cilia helps in moving particles in particular direction. So in our trachea, what happens is if there is any mucus or any foreign body present in the tracheal tube, then what happens, or a windpipe, that is, these ciliated columnar epithelium, the cilia of the ciliated columnar epithelium will move in one direction, generally in the upward direction, and try to remove that plug of mucus or that foreign body out, or dust particle too. Whereas in the fallopian tubes, that is the oviducts present in the female reproductive system, they help, these lashing movements of the cilia help in moving the ovum towards the uterus, so that further down the fallopian tube, so that fertilization can take place later on. So function is they keep lashing to move materials entering these organs. Simple to understand. So the such kind of a columnar epithelium has a specific function, that is ciliated columnar epithelium. The cilia keep lashing out and help in movement. Now let us see the figure. Yes. How does it look? All right. Okay, if you can see, these are the columnar cells, as I told you, column-like, pillar-like cells. Now we are going to the second type of columnar epithelium. In between, if you can see, there is a kind of a large cell between these column or pillar-like cells. Such kind of a columnar epithelium, having these specialized cells in between, we call it as a glandular epithelium. So a columnar epithelium which has large cells gland-like cells which secrete certain substances. If you can see, these are the secretions that are given out from this particular cell in between these columnar epithelial cells present in the lining of the stomach and the intestines. So basic function will be they'll be secreting something. So function of glandular epithelium, you know, glands generally secrete. For example, your tear glands, your sweat glands, if you observe them, you will get to see this kind of glandular cells in between the columnar epithelium. And then such kind of a columnar epithelium is called as a glandular epithelium. So in columnar epithelium, we did study about the ciliated columnar epithelium and now also about glandular epithelium. Yes, here it is, exactly what I was trying to tell you, right? Okay, so you can see here, this is a typical columnar epithelial cells. If you can see, like a pillar, and at the top, if you can see these fine hair-like projections, these are the cilia. And these cilia will lash out in one particular direction and will help. And if you can see, everywhere there will be presence of this basement membrane whenever we show an epithelial tissue. Now, there's one special kind of columnar epithelium where you will get layers of different types of cells. So at the topmost, you might have a squamous kind of a layer. You might have a cuboidal here and a glandular here. Such kind of a squamous epithelium, we call it as a stratified squamous epithelium. Stratified or strata means layers. So this is a special kind of squamous epithelium that you might find, okay? But you need to know about it. But yes, this is how a ciliated epithelium or columnar epithelium looks. We talked about the glandular epithelium. So these are the special types of columnar epithelium. Okay, now we'll move ahead. Right, so we are going on now to the second type of epithelium, right, which is connective tissue. Right? Connective tissue. We finished epithelial tissue. In that we talked about squamous epithelial tissue. We talked about the cuboidal epithelial tissue. We talked about the columnar. In columnar 2, we had the ciliated columnar and the glandular epithelium. Now we are going to talk about the connective tissue. Connective, that means it is going to connect. Very special characteristic of the connective tissue is there will be presence of abundance of intercellular substance. Between the cells, there will be a lot of intercellular substance, which we call as matrix, and cellular elements will be very few, but there will be presence of fibers. Now, if you remember, when we saw the figure of the epithelial tissue, we never saw any fibers. We just saw cells, cells, and cells with nucleus placed on a basement membrane. But whenever we have to show a connective tissue, you have to remember presence of a matrix, that is a lot of intercellular substance between the two cells. The cellular elements will be few, so few of cells, and you will get to see more of fibers within. That is connective tissue. Now, function is it connects various organs. So it is a connective tissue, so definitely it is going to connect the various organs. Now, there are 3 types of connective tissue. We make it into 3 categories: connective tissue proper. In that we have our areolar tissue, adipose tissue, and fibrous connective tissue. So there are 3 types of connective tissue under connective tissue proper. The second is the supportive connective tissue, that is going to support the structures. Here we have cartilage and bone, and the fluid connective tissue. Name itself explains everything. It is fluid in nature. In that we have blood and lymph. So to understand 3 types of connective tissue: the connective tissue proper, in that we have the areolar tissue, adipose tissue, and fibrous connective tissue. In supportive connective tissue, that is, they provide support to other parts, we have the cartilage and the bone. And the fluid connective tissue, fluid in nature, we have the blood and lymph. Okay, so now we are going to study about each of these in detail. Now, since we have already told that this is connective tissue, so we know one thing, that they are going to have more of fibers, less of cells, and an intercellular substance, which we call as matrix. So first type, connective tissue proper, I'm taking areolar connective tissue. Now you can see here, lots of fibers in between. The cellular elements are so few. Cells are very few, scattered here and there. So they are made up of fibers and the matrix. Matrix is this ground substance, which we call, and less of cells. Yes, this is typically a connective tissue. Where is it present? It is present beneath the epidermis of the skin. Simple. It is like a packing tissue. We call it a packing tissue. Simple. Anytime you try to lift your skin away from the muscle, you will see that there is something which keeps it back, keeps it attached. That is the areolar connective tissue. If this areolar connective tissue would not have been present, we would be able to separate our skin fully away from that. Would not be a good sight, right? So it is important. We call it as a packing tissue. Its main function is it makes the skin elastic and helps to withstand pulling strain. So if anybody tries to pull your skin, it will try to keep it back and maintain the elasticity of your skin. So it's a very important role that it is playing and very important function that it is having. So the first in connective tissue proper, areolar connective tissue. We go to the next, that is adipose tissue. Simple. When I talk of adipose tissue, it is related with adipocytes, that is your fat containing cells. So definitely you will have this, if you can see, specialized cells which are going to store fat. Okay, so they have specialized cells which store fat. So this tissue, if you can see, is made up of these special kind of cells which are going to store fat in them. Where are they present? Again, under our skin. So yes, beneath our skin, there is a layer of fat. It insulates us, keeps us warm during cold winters, right? It is very, very important. Also around the kidneys, and most of your internal organs have a layer of this adipose tissue, because this adipose tissue also protects these organs, right? And also main function is insulation. It keeps our body nice and warm. Yes, and there is fat stored in these special cells in the adipocytes. So yes, that is the special function of adipocytes. So we have finished, talked about areolar connective tissue. We have talked about the adipose tissue in connective tissue proper. Now let us go to the fibrous connective tissue. So these, as we can understand, when I'm saying fibrous connective tissue, it's very easy to understand that it is going to be made up of fibers, right? Fibers and fibers. So you can see more of fibers and less of the cellular elements to form tendons and ligaments. So I'm having tendons and ligaments. A tendon is a structure, a fibrous connective tissue, which connects my muscle to the bone, right? So it is because of the contraction of these muscles that we are able to move our body parts. So it is this tendon. The muscle fibers cannot go and attach to the bone separately, right? So they form a kind of a fibrous connective tissue, which is made up of fibers, and these get attached to the bone. So when the muscle fibers will contract, this will pull the bone upwards, and we are able to move ourselves or move our hands and legs. So tendons are fibrous connective tissues which connect muscle to the bone, and ligaments are also fibrous connective tissues which connect one bone to the other bone, generally at the joint. So you can see this is a typical knee joint that has been shown. Two bones are coming and attaching here itself here. They cannot bite, so there's no glue or no gummy substance which is going to keep them together, right? So these ligaments, these fibers around it, which we call as ligaments, are what are going to hold these two bones together at the joint. So that is the fibrous connective tissue. We talk about tendons and ligaments. Yes. So we have finished about the three categories of connective tissue proper. Let us go to the next type, supportive connective tissue. So you know it is a connective tissue which is going to support, right? Yes. So in that we have, if you remember, I had talked about two types, cartilage and bone. So let us talk about the cartilage, right? Can you see this? There is this cartilage in between. Now you have to understand it is a non-porous. So you will not have any pores in this non-porous tissue with dense intercellular matrix. So if you look at it, can you see the matrix? Yes, it is dense matrix. No blood vessels and nerves are present. So if there is no blood supply, no nerve supply, they are semi-transparent and elastic. So between the bones too, you act like a cushion. That is the cartilage. Around it too, around near the bones. Yes, they will be supporting the bones. Ligaments will be attaching one bone to the other at the joint. Cartilage is going to support these structures where it is present. Yes, our nose, the tip of our nose, if you touch, yes, they are elastic. So you can feel it, you can move it. Our ears, right? The ear pinna, the rings of the trachea. Trachea, we need to keep it patent. We cannot allow it to just collapse. So we have this cartilage in the form of small C-shaped rings around the trachea, between our vertebrae, yes, and our ends of our long bones. So this is exactly where this typical supportive connective tissue called cartilage. You have to remember there is no blood supply, no nerve supply to the cartilage. It is non-porous and has a dense intercellular matrix. As it is a supportive connective tissue, function is going to be to support the parts. Yes. Now we are going to the next supportive connective tissue, our bone. So we already know bone is going to be definitely hard structure, right? We know it. It forms the framework of our body on which the muscles are attached. So this is going to be hard and a porous tissue. The cartilage was non-porous. This is hard. Cartilage was elastic. This has a good bone, has a good supply of blood vessels and nerves, unlike the cartilage. So you can see the difference between the two supportive connective tissues. It is made up of both living cells and a rigid mass of inorganic salts. So salts are also combined into or mineralized into the bone. And typical structure you can see in the form of concentric rings, right? You have the eversion canal. This is a typical osteocyte or a bone cell, right? Okay, now we go on to the next. We're going to the fluid connective tissue. As I'd already talked to you, it is the connective tissue which is going to be in a fluid or a liquid form. In that we have two types, the blood and the lymph. Blood, we already know the liquid part has a liquid part which we call as plasma, okay? And in the plasma you are having these cellular components, that is your RBCs, red blood cells, your white blood cells, and your platelets, these small ones, right? So these are the cellular components which are in, and it's a homogeneous mixture. You'll not be able to see in a drop of blood, you'll not be able to separate out the plasma and the cellular components. Yes. So this is the first fluid connective tissue. We already know most of our nutrients, our wastes all go in the dissolved form in this plasma and are carried. Oxygen, carbon dioxide, all these flow through the blood, right? So through the blood, it's a fluid. It connects the various cells and carries the various nutrients. Second kind of fluid connective tissue is the lymph. It is we also call it as the interstitial fluid. Okay, it is the fluid which surrounds our body cells. So it is the fluid part of blood itself, because of the pressure with which the blood flows through the blood vessels, some part of it oozes out from the blood vessels, right? So it is a plasma which is oozed out of the vessels, and it will contain white blood cells but no red blood cells and platelets. Please understand, difference between blood and lymph is that blood contains all the cellular components, lymph contains plasma, the liquid portion, and white blood cells and platelets to some extent. No platelets, white blood cells, yes. The function, transportation of nutrients, and also helps in immunity, because white blood cells are basically concerned with immunity. Yes. So fluid connective tissue we have talked about. Now we'll go to the next, muscular tissue. Right. When I talk of muscular tissue, you have to remember we are talking about our muscles. Yes. There are three kinds of muscles or muscular fibers or muscular tissue in our body. Striated, it consists of striations or bands, unstriated muscles, and cardiac muscles. So we'll study each of these in detail. When I talk of striations or striated muscles, they show light and dark striations or bands. These are voluntary in nature. That means they are under the control of our will. We also call them as our skeletal muscles. So the muscles which are attached to our skeletal system are the striated muscles or the voluntary muscles, right? They are found attached to our skeleton. Now, unstriated, simple. There are no striations. Do not show these light and dark striations or bands. They are generally spindle shaped. So they will be narrow at one end, narrow at the other, and broad at the center, and they will have a central nucleus present, spindle shaped, and these are involuntary. They are not in the control of our will. So they are found in the iris of the eye, lining of our blood vessels, stomach lining, intestine. So all these organs just go on. Even when we are sleeping, the peristaltic movement of the GI tract keeps on going. So what is happening is, these are all involuntary. They are not in the control of our will. So we have talked about striated muscles, which are voluntary or skeletal muscles. Unstriated, also called as smooth muscles, because they do not show any striations and they are involuntary. Right? Let us talk about the third type, that is the cardiac muscle. So if you can see here, I will show you. Right. So this is the first type, the striated muscles. Second type, you can see the spindle-shaped smooth muscles or unstriated muscles, and these are the cardiac muscles. Cardiac muscles show striation, but please understand they are a different category from our striated muscles because these striated muscles were voluntary. Cardiac muscles, though striated, they are involuntary. Cardiac muscle has to continue working. They have to keep on contracting and relaxing. They cannot be in our control, right? And another important thing is even though they are striated, you can see they are branched. Whereas here, there is no branching seen. Okay, they're simple single fibers. Here, branching is seen, those striations are present, but these are involuntary and a very important feature of cardiac muscles. They are indefatigable. They do not get fatigued very easily, found in our heart. The name itself, cardiac, related to the heart. So these type of involuntary but striated muscles, which are indefatigable, are found in our heart. Okay. Come to the last type, that is the neural tissue or related to our nervous system, right? It consists of the neuron. The single unit of the neural tissue is called the neuron. So many neurons together make up the neural tissue. It has a cell body, which we call as the cyton, with the nucleus at the center. And you can see many branched structures, which we call as dendrites, and one single long process, which we call as an axon. And at the end, this axon branches out to give you terminal nerve endings or terminal branches. So it has many a cell body or a cyton and many branches called dendrites and one single long process called the axon. The main function of the neural tissue is it is concerned with carrying our nerve impulses, so it is related with our nervous system and even sensory perception and responses. So if somebody gets a pointed instrument and touches to my skin, yes, that impulse, that pain that is felt and the perception of touch, of pain, pressure, hot, cold is because of the impulses carried by this nervous tissue. Yes. So what we have seen here is a brief idea about the our system of animal tissues, that is various tissues that are present in our body. And believe me, all these various tissues work together, work as one, and help a particular organism to function properly, rhythmically and properly. So these tissues are very, very important for us. Hope you have understood this topic, right? And thank you for watching. Bye-bye.